Hello, my name is Dan McClosky. I do radio interviews with blues and jazz musicians, and you're listening to Talkin' Blues.
Dan, you're also known as Dan the Hat. Tell me where the hat comes from.
Well, I don't know where I originally got it, but when I was probably about 17, I found this cool little hat, and similar to what I'm wearing now, and I just started wearing it all the time, and it just felt so comfortable on my head. And I was thinking about it, why. It's kind of like when I was a kid and my dad would kind of reach down and pat me on the head, and I think it's a comforting feeling.
But that became your image.
Yeah, I was known as Danny the Hat. That was by people like Steve Miller and Mike Bloomfield and Tracy Nelson and Boz Scaggs. They know me as the Hat, or Danny the Hat.
Did you ever play music?
I play a little bit of guitar.
Okay.
I play at guitar. I mean, I don't even say I play guitar because I don't play any chords. I can play a little lead, just fool around.
When did your love of music start? How did that come about?
Well, my parents liked jazz. In fact, in the 40s, when we were in Minneapolis, they went to see Dizzy Gillespie. He was on a 2-week run at a club, and they met him, and really, in fact, he said he wanted to come over to their house for dinner. It never happened, and but I mean, they were cool young people. They liked jazz and stuff. My dad used to play 78s of well, not 78s, I guess early 33 and a third records with Sarah Vaughan and Roy Haynes and people like that. And so I started listening to music sometimes through osmosis. It would play through the speaker, which was in the ceiling in the adjacent room to my bedroom. I'd hear music coming through at night. And they also were into classical music quite a bit. But in my early teens, I started listening to Dixieland. I loved Dixieland music, and I loved Boogie Woogie. One of my first records was a Memphis Slim record on Folkways. Great record. And so I got into it originally through Dixieland, and then the early blues.
Whereabouts were you located back then?
I was in that was first in Minneapolis. I moved out here to California, to Oakland area, when I was 11, Berkeley, Oakland.
What was that like, that adjustment to moving out to Berkeley?
Well, it's sixth grade. You've got to make new friends, and it's a little daunting. Much better weather out here, and much better food. So, and my dad loved Chinese food, so we had actually come out to California in '56. We lived in Palo Alto for a year. He was a professor, and we lived in Palo Alto for a year, and we'd come up to San Francisco every Sunday. We'd go to Golden Gate Park, and we'd always eat at this Chinese restaurant called Sun Un Hung. And so then in '59, when the Giants had moved out to San Francisco, my dad from back east, he was a big Giants fan, and that was one of the reasons he took a job at the University of California in Berkeley.
Wow. That's a serious fan.
Yeah, and my mom, too. They both had PhDs.
Okay, so tell me about your relationship to radio.
Well, that's just a total fluke. I think I was about 14 years old, 13 or 14, probably about 14. I think I was in beginning of 10th grade maybe, and I was walking on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley with this girl that I liked. And she saw this doorway to a radio station, and she said, "Hey, let's go up here." I go, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah." So we went up the stairs, walked up the stairs to the station, and this guy named Marco Treganza met us up there at the top of the stairs, and he said, "Hey, he said, would you like to see the station?" He was a volunteer, and I said, "Yeah, sure," because I had built stereo kits from my dad: amplifier, preamplifier, tuner, and I liked electronics to a certain extent. Not that I understood any of the technical stuff, but I like to build things. So I was interested in equipment and sound and what have you. So he said, "How would you like to be a volunteer?" And I said, "A volunteer?" He says, "Yeah, you could become an engineer, a radio engineer." Here I am, 14 years old. I said, "Well, okay." So I went.
I mean, did you have much relationship to radio before then?
No,
Like as a listener?
I had been on a jazz. There was a guy named Dixie Bob, and he had a show in San Francisco on I think it was KMPX or something. It was one of these early radio stations playing Dixieland music. And I actually went on his show. I think I was 13 at the time. My parents took me over there, and then we got to go see Turk Murphy afterwards and Pat Yankee. They were great. She's a great singer, and Turk Murphy's a great Dixieland trombone player. So that was my first time to actually talking on the radio. Before I'd been at this radio station in Berkeley.
But were you an avid listener of radio back then?
Well, FM was just starting out. I mean,
Okay.
it wasn't a big thing. There weren't a lot of stations. My dad listened to classical music every morning from this radio station in San Francisco, KSFR. No, I listened to AM. I listened to AM and listened to this little Dixieland show from Shakey's Pizza out in Pittsburgh, California, and I fell in love with Jelly Roll Morton, and they played a lot of Jelly Roll Morton records. And Jelly Roll Morton, his stuff he did, like Grandpa's Spells and Steamboat Stomp and stuff. They're just jewels. They're just perfect recordings, beautifully put together musically. And so, that's what I would do at night a lot. I'd listen to that kind of music, listen to that station, which was hard to get on my little radio, but I was able to do it.
So when they offered you a job to volunteer at this radio station, tell me about that and that experience.
Well, I remember getting my third class license. You had to have a license, which was very simple to get a third class. First class, you would have to really know some math and a lot of technical stuff. But for a third class, pretty basic. And I remember going in. My shift was on Saturday morning from 8 till probably noon, I guess, once a week. And I don't know how I got there. My parents must have given me a ride down the hill because we lived up in the hills, in the Berkeley Hills. And I just remember coming into the station maybe 7:45, and the guy who was instructing me was smoking a pipe and why going. And I still remember the theme music started out with Bach, a great Bach organ piece, and it was exciting. I mean, that's the station I was at, KPFA, is a 59,000 watt station. It's I think the first listener supported radio station in the country.
Wow.
And I had to learn how to thread the reel-to-reel tape recorders and cue a record and turn on the mics and cue the announcer and stuff. And I'm really amazed that at age 14 they're going to let some kid in there to do that. It didn't make sense, but I guess they were hard up for volunteers.
At what age did you become a disc jockey?
I believe I was in 12th grade, so I was like 17.
Okay.
Maybe 16 or 17 years old. There was a show. Well, one of the things I used to do is I used to engineer radio shows for Phil Elwood. And Phil Elwood was a jazz and music critic. He was a music teacher, a jazz teacher, a history teacher at Laney College, and he wrote a column all the time for the San Francisco Examiner. Mm-hmm. And he had this show called Jazz Archives. And Jazz Archives was a program where he played old 78. So he would come into the station, and this is I was probably about six, probably met him when I was 15 or 16. He'd bring a big stack of 78s, and he would do all of the announcing for it, and then I would have to intersperse the announcing between selections. So I got to know him, and I got to see some great people that he brought over to the station. Jimmy Rushing was one of them, and Randy. I have to think of some of the other guys. Oh, Charlie Mingus, Charles Mingus, and others. So I got to meet some of these famous people, and that was very exciting. So I learned a lot about jazz from him, and then I was engineering a late night show called the Midnight Special. The lady named Gert Carrito did, and a lot of this is like '65, and people like Janis Joplin, who I don't remember coming there, but Country Joe would be there, Janis Joplin occasionally, I guess. Some probably people that maybe ended up playing in the Dead. I didn't know who they were. There was a round table. There were like 10 or 15 musicians, and they'd play guitar and sing and sing one of their songs. This is before stuff was really starting to take off. And at the end of the show at midnight, they would shut down they said, well, that's it, good night, we're signing off for the night. And I said to the lady that ran it, Gert, I said, well, I want to do a show after this. Why can't I do a jazz show? And they worked on it, and she said, okay. And so I started to do a show called All Night Jazz. And that was a ball. I mean, I'd start there at midnight and we'd go till 8 in the morning.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I'm in high school doing this, and the kids at school would know me. Oh, well, you were on the radio, and my friends would come by once in a while and see me, and it was, it was pretty exciting to do that and have your own show. I had Roland Kirk on my show. He wasn't Rahsaan Roland Kirk at that time. He was Roland Kirk. I brought him over, and he, I think a couple of times he came over, and in fact, one time we even had him up. My parents made him a nice dinner, and he came up to the house for dinner, and that was fun. He was an amazing musician, and it was fun to get to know him a little bit. And I think Eddie Gomez came on my show. He was the bass player with Bill Evans at the time, so I was starting to get to know a few of the musicians, and I would go sneak into some of the jazz clubs in San Francisco, and then I started doing interviews for the first hour of the show.
So this is for that all-night show that we're talking about, all-night jazz.
Right.
Tell me about your first interview. I believe it was with Les McCann.
Yeah. Well, actually, I had done earlier ones, I think, where with Roland Kirk, where he was just a guest on my show. It was a little different from a structured interview. And then I did one with a local guy, local musician, and then with one with Les McCann was pretty interesting. He was playing either at the El Matador or the Jazz Workshop on Broadway in San Francisco, and I went to see him, and I loved his music because it was gospel blues style music. And by the way, I should say that when I was a little younger, I would go and see some of these great blues musicians, Lightning Hopkins and Mance Lipscomb, playing at this local club in Berkeley. So I did start to hear some live, real blues, and so with Les McCann, we had kind of a spirited relationship there. He was a real character, and the interview I did with him, I came over there with my little cassette deck, a little Sony cassette deck, and he had a Nagra reel-to-reel, which is like a $2,000 reel-to-reel, which is used professionally in broadcasting. And he said, no, we're not going to use your little cassette machine. We're going to use my Nagra. And I didn't know how to do interviews very well at that point, and he took control, and I just kind of went along with it, and he made mincemeat out of me. I asked him, I gave him kind of a snide remark because he did a song about L.A. and New York and Chicago. New York's not my town. Chicago's okay. L.A., that's my town. And Northern California, we Northern and Southern California have a kind of a tough relationship there, back and forth. And I said, oh, L.A., why do you like L.A.? And he picked up on it, and he started giving me silly answers that made no sense whatsoever. Like he'd say, "Well, L.A. man, I mean, well, you got the cable car, and then of course over by the Bay Bridge, and then when you're taking the train, and then you see a beautiful sunset, and I'm going, what the heck's he talking about?" But then once in a while I get a straight answer out of him. But the music that we played in the show, the interviews that I always did included music, and so I reluctantly put that interview up on my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel, which is DannyTheHat.com. It's a website actually, www.DannyTheHat.com, DannyTheHat.com. And so I reluctantly recently put that interview up on there, but I started listening to it, and I just started laughing because it's fun, and I'm just learning my way.
Okay, well,
but
tell me about these interviews. I mean, you're still a young guy.
Yeah.
I mean, 16, 17, 18 years old. You're talking to these legends at a time when music was really, really happening. So we're talking like late 60s to early 70s. And you have some amazing, amazing guests that people can check out on your YouTube channel. Was it difficult to get those people to come on your show?
I was thinking about that. I don't think so, really. I was probably about 19 to 20 when I really started doing interviews. What I would do is I'd go to a jazz club, and I said, I have a jazz show, and I would like to have you on my program. Can we put together a program? I'll bring my reel-to-reel and microphones, and we'll do a recording, and then we'll play music. So I had Horace Silver on my show, and which is now on my website, 2 one-hour shows we put together. Lee Morgan, I have the only interview on the net with Lee Morgan, which had I had it up earlier on my website, it probably would have been in that movie, They Called Him Morgan, which is a great movie about Lee Morgan. Mm-hmm. He was a spectacular trumpet player, just a master. And for whatever reason, I didn't have a problem talking with people. It seemed to work out, and I was able to make them feel comfortable. And so I got some pretty interesting interviews with people, and they used them on my jazz show. And a number of them: Jackie Bayard, piano player; Kenny Burrell, a guitar player. Just a lot of them, and they're all up on my YouTube channel now. But it was great to be able to talk to these people.
Mm-hmm. You said that you weren't very good when you did your first few interviews, especially the one with Les McCann. Although I disagree, I think it's a great interview.
Oh, you actually heard it?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
What I loved about listening to your interviews was, as we had said, it took place at a time when music was happening. You're interviewing,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the latest thing you put up was the Van Morrison interview, which was
Right.
done in 1971. And, everybody conjures up an image of what Van Morrison is like, especially now. But you had him talking. It was a really nice conversation. The one I really liked was the one with Elvin Bishop. And there was just something about, I don't think Elvin had much success at this point. I think he was an established artist, but I don't think he had a hit song at that point. He talked about not liking his voice, that not feeling confident as a singer. I mean, he was very open with you and very revealing, which I found amazing. And for a young 20, maybe not even 20-year-old kid to get that from the artist, I thought was amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. So I knew some of these people through, I got to know some of these musicians a little bit through Mike Bloomfield.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably my really big, I don't know what to call it, a big break. But I mean, that was getting to know Mike helped me talk with a number of these people. But I should talk about my first big interview. Was with B.B. King. Mm-hmm. That was in 1969. I shouldn't say big interview because Lee Morgan, I mean, you don't get any better than Lee Morgan. Not as many people know him, but I mean, from a stature point of view, he's a spectacular musician. I had a very good friend from Minneapolis, a guy named Charlie, and we had a mutual friend, Mark Naftalin, who I grew up with in Minneapolis. He was older than me, and Mark played with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And I remember I was up in a little town called Jenner by the sea, by the coast, and was talking to Charlie and to Mark, and I said I wanted to interview B.B. King. I don't know how to go about it. And Mark Naftalin, he said, well, go talk to my friend Mike Bloomfield. And Bloomfield, of course, I knew his name. And I had seen him at the Fillmore, too. I saw him actually when he ate fire, which was really something to watch him eat fire. And he's a spectacular musician, of course. Mm-hmm. So I went over to Mike's, and Mark said, go talk to him because he'll give you all kinds of questions to ask B.B. King. So I said, okay, all right, I'll go do that. And I met him there, and, at first it's a little, like we don't know each other, but over time, he was very helpful. He gave me all these good questions to ask. And then after I did the interview with B.B., I brought it back to him and played it for him, and he really liked it. And actually played commercially in a number of different places. It was because B.B. was really, it was just when he was doing The Thrill Is Gone, and Everybody Wants to Know Why I Sing the Blues. And so he was really crossing over to white audiences. And I was a huge B.B. King fan. So that connection with Bloomfield really, really helped me. And a couple of years later, then he helped me with doing interviews with Bobby Blue Bland and others, just running things by him. So we became very good friends. And we'd go out to dinner a lot. I would stay over at his house where he lived in Sausalito, in Mill Valley, rather. And it was just fun hanging out with him because, of course, he was a great musician. And Probably the smartest guy I ever met. I think my dad was a professor and my mom, and neither, and they're around all these erudite, smart people. But I don't think anybody I ever met has been smarter or funnier or quicker than Mike Bloomfield.
What did you learn about yourself from that experience?
I guess it gave me validation, gave me confidence that I could, talk with people and ask them good questions. I have to say, in listening to the way you conduct interviews is very similar to my way. You let the person speak and ask probing questions, and it's not about you; it's about the other person, and that's really, really key. A lot of interviews don't know how to do that. So I think instinctively, maybe from being around my mom a lot, she had a way of talking to people and getting them to feel comfortable and asking very good questions in her work. And so maybe that kind of rubbed off on me.
I mean, I think that's key to make people feel comfortable, where they can open up and say things that they mean, as opposed to just giving you your basic answers.
Right.
And I think you do that, and you did that at a very young age. I wonder, what's it like for you to go back to some of these interviews and listen to something you did 50 years ago?
It's real interesting because I don't realize, that's interesting. And then I said, gee, that was a good question, Dan. You asked him a good question. I can't believe you thought of that. It's kind of, I'm a different person. I mean, nowadays when I do interviews, I do it electronically. We do it, and then, it's all digital, and you edit with a mouse. And you can, when I say something, I can cut out a pause, or I can cut out a repeat if I don't like the way I said something, and I redo it. Back in those days, everything had to be done with a razor blade and a grease marking pen and the reel-to-reel, and you would move the reel-to-reel back and forth till you found the right spot. Like the word them, you'd go them, and you'd find exactly where it starts, and you'd mark it with a grease pen, and then you'd put it on the splicing block. So I couldn't do the kind of edits that I do now. But in those days, when I was in my late, teens and early 20s, I could speak much better. Like you can hear me now struggling with extemporaneous. It was easy for me. So I didn't need to do as much editing. But, it was fun. I would do a show, and I'd go out and do an interview with somebody, and I'd work and I'd get back to the radio station next day or whatever, and I would start working at night on it, maybe 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And first you copy, if it's done on my cassette, I'd copy it to reel, and then I edit it down, and then I find areas where I can intersperse music. And then you have to figure out where you're going to add the music. And one of the things that I like about doing a radio show as opposed to a podcast, and nothing wrong with a podcast, most people, that's what they listen to these days, but you can't really have music in there unless it's original music.
Right.
If I'm correct, there's too many copyright issues. But I like to have music illustrate what the person's talking about. When they, like when Van Morrison talks about Brown Eyed Girl, I was able to play it right after that. So when you're putting together these shows, you're figuring out exactly where the music should fit in, and maybe you want to have a bed of music before the vocal starts. So if somebody's talking about a hit and they say, yeah, and it became a really big hit, right at that point the vocal might start, but the music was playing in the background. And so that was very hard to do in the old days because you had to back time something, you had to have a stopwatch, you had to figure out exactly where, and we'd make a reel-to-reel tape go backwards to get to the point where, no, okay, that's 18 seconds. That's where I got to start the music. And then you would make a mental note of it. So I would work all night on these shows sometimes. And it usually took around 15, 20 hours of editing and production to get something in place.
So it wasn't necessarily live to air. You would actually record your show, do the editing, and then play the tape? Is that the way it would work?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
I can't imagine that amount of work that went into something like that.
Yeah, and then I'd have to go to work the next day, or go to school, whatever it was. Well, back by that time, I was in college, but yeah, I mean, it was a lot of work, but it was fun, man. The greatest days of my life probably working in radio at that station. It was just so exciting.
Well, you got to meet a lot of people and interview a lot of amazing people. Is there anybody else that people should check out on your YouTube page?
Well, Freddie King. I just put up a two-part interview with Freddie King. And I'll tell you about that one because that is really, really, really interesting interview that he gave me. What happened was I think it was 1971. I went over to his, I think it was his dad's house in San Francisco, and it was up right near this big transmitter, big radio transmitting tower on the giant, had like several TV stations on it and radio stations. And his place was right near there. And I remember setting up my reel-to-reel to get a recording, but there was so much RF radio interference that it was coming into the reel-to-reel and through the mics. So I was not able to do a recording. So I had to use my little Sony cassette machine. And back in those days, this was, like I say, 1971, cassettes were just beginning to, they weren't even getting popular. There wasn't even a cassette machine that had Dolby in it at that time. So everything had a hiss in it, and it was not considered a real medium. People used reel-to-reel still for that. So I did this interview with him on my little Sony portable cassette machine. And then I got back to the station and was excited to play it and, produce it into a show. And lo and behold, the sound quality was mostly like this. It was just all muffled. And I go, oh, man, this is terrible. And I didn't have a good cassette machine that I could put it into, a professional cassette machine, because they didn't exist. So I said, I can only get about 10 minutes out of this. So I put together a show back in 1971 with him, but it only had about 10 minutes of interview, and it was mostly music. And it's still on my website, and the music on it is just great. Just wonderful music. And his comments were really good. The other day I was doing an interview with Tommy Castro, and I mentioned to him that, I won't say the other day, it was about 3 months ago, and I mentioned that I had a cassette I was looking for. I'm going to show it to you on here. It's called Night Cry. And I said, I've got a cassette of you playing with this group called Night Cry. I'd like to play some of those songs, but I got to find the cassette. And so I started searching through all my old cassettes. And I finally found it. And then I came across the Freddie King interview. And I go, let me just see if this plays. I'm just curious. Lo and behold, it was about a 50-minute interview, 55 minutes. And Freddie King was real relaxed and laughing, and it was just, he was in great spirits. And so I said, my God, I can put this together in a 2-part radio show where he's really talking and and going into details. And so I produced it, and it ran on KPFA. There's a great blues show on KPFA every Saturday from 11 to 2 p.m. California time with a guy named Tom Mazzolini. He's been doing a blues show for probably 30 or 40 years now on the radio, and he used to produce the San Francisco Blues Festival, and he's extremely knowledgeable about blues, and he can speak extemporaneously on different artists. He's got a phenomenal memory. So he's run almost all of my interviews that I did 50 years ago. He's run them on his show in recent years.
Wow.
And so we ran the Freddie King one recently, and I got some very, very good response on that one because Fred he was just calm and relaxed and very, very, very good.
Well,
so
what I liked about it, because I don't think I've ever heard him being interviewed. So it was really wonderful to hear his voice, and once again, I mean, he was very comfortable with your questions.
I remember when I came up to his house, and he answered the door. He had all this white cream on his face, and it turns out he was using, I guess it was something like Nair that removes his beard, because
Really?
with his skin, if he used a razor blade, he would cut himself. And so, I still remember that, and it had a certain smell to it, this Nair smell, the chemical smell, but he was cool. He was just a really neat guy, and it's such a tragedy that he died so young. I mean, just terrible tragedy. There was one interview that got away from me that I really wanted to do, and that was with Magic Sam.
Wow.
Magic Sam was supposed to come to the radio station for the interview. I had seen him play at this club called Mandrakes, and Magic Sam was just spectacular guitarist and singer and songwriter, and he did all this with a trio. It was just amazing. But anyway, he was supposed to show up, and he didn't show up. And then later, I contacted him and somehow got in touch with him, and found out that he'd been sick and couldn't make it. And he got the flu or something. So I didn't get that interview. But then he died shortly thereafter. So I put together a program that's on my YouTube channel. I interviewed Bloomfield and Charlie Musselwhite and a few other people about him. And so we put together a memorial. And that program, the memorial to Magic Sam, has a live recording that was done at this club in Berkeley called Mandrakes. And you just get the feeling of what it's like to be in a small blues club. Not a big crowd or anything, but boy, it's great. So if anybody wants to check out Magic Sam on my YouTube channel, the music on that is just great. Unfortunately, he's not talking, but people are certainly talking about him and what he was like. So you had asked me what are some of the other ones that I've done. I think you mentioned earlier. Did a recent one with Maria Muldaur, who did Midnight at the Oasis.
Yeah.
The B.B. King ones. A recent one with Mark Hummel, the harmonica player. I've got 5 different ones with Mike Bloomfield. 2 that I did. One that Bob Simmons did, where he talks with him about Newport Folk Festival and about the Electric Flag. And then the most recent ones I put up are the last interview that Mike Bloomfield did 2 days before he passed away of a drug overdose.
Wow.
And they're called, I think, Mike Bloomfield full interviews or something like that, part 1 and part 2. And what was fun about putting that show together was that he would talk about his musical influences. And because the interviewer was doing a really good job of asking him questions. And so he when he talked about Gene Vincent, I played a little clip of audio of a solo from Gene Vincent. It was actually from his backup guy. He talks about Ricky Nelson and the guitar player who I think it was James Burton. And when he talks about these other artists, I was able to illustrate exactly what he was talking about. And so if people are blues fans that want to learn about some of these early influences on Bloomfield, music from the 50s, Scotty Moore, playing with Elvis and stuff like that, that's in there. But he also talks about Robert Johnson, and an extent I played 4 different selections of Robert Johnson, and Mike was a blues historian, so he was able to really talk about what Robert Johnson contributed to music and what he was about. And he was able, Bloomfield would go around and talk to all these blues musicians when he was young. He would travel to different areas. He would go around with Big Joe Williams, and in fact, he has a great story, Big Joe Williams and me, where they go into some really rough areas in Indiana, I think, and other places. And Bloomfield talks about Robert Johnson, and he mentions that he talks about how he died and the people who actually knew Robert Johnson, and he's interviewing them. So that was really interesting. Let me just see who. Country Joe McDonald from Country Joe and the Fish. He was in the Woodstock movie.
Mm-hmm.
Give me an F. Give me a
Yep.
you know what. And let's see here. Well, I did 3 recent interviews. Well, I should at some point ask me how I got back into doing.
Well, that was my next question.
years.
Was that
Yeah,
on your site there are definitely great interviews from late '60s to early '70s, and then
Johnny Otis, by the way, just that came to my
Right.
mind, and Little Milton, Tracy Nelson, people like that. But go ahead.
So what happened between '71 and was it 2022 when you came back?
Yeah, I had to work. I had to make a living, and I got a degree in broadcasting at San Francisco State, and then 50 cents could get you on the bus at that time. That's about all that degree was worth, was nothing. I didn't want to start at some little radio station, so I decided, and my dad had the audacity to tell me that he was not going to give me any money anymore now that I was out of college, and that really upset me. I couldn't believe it. Here it is in October of '71, and he's saying, "You're off the payroll." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "It's time for you to get a job." So I got a job at Pacific Stereo as a stock boy. I knew one of the principals at Pacific Stereo when it was a small chain. It became a pretty big chain of stores in the '70s and the '80s. Then it eventually went out of business. But so I was a stock boy, and I would be vacuuming at night and mounting cartridges and turntables and carrying speakers out to people's cars and messing my back up doing that. And I would do that, and I would listen to my shows as they ran on KPFA. And the guy who was the assistant manager I'd go turn on all the receivers in systems around the stereo store to hear my show as it came on at 9 o'clock at night. I wanted to make sure that I had not messed up, that the production was okay, and that the editing was okay. And he would go around and turn them all off. And there was no internet, there was no email, there was no responses to whether anybody listened to the shows or liked it. Occasionally I'd get a card, and I'm saying, I'm working all night producing this show. Now I want to hear on the radio. This guy is telling me that I can't, that I need to vacuum and get the heck out of there, and he could care less. And I go, why am I doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So I quit. I just stopped doing. That was '72, I think. So I just quit. And then, in answer to why I got back into it, here it is, COVID time, 2020. Got a lot of time on my hand. I've got tons and tons of my old reel-to-reel masters of interviews, and I started going through all of my 7-inch reel-to-reel tapes. I'll show. Here's
Right.
one here. This was Eddie Cleanhead Vincent,
Hmm.
which I just put up on my channel too. Yeah, an interview I did with Eddie Cleanhead in '71. So I came across this reel-to-reel and all kinds of other ones, and I started making copies of them. But I didn't know. I wanted my stuff to live on. I didn't know how, because these are interviews with great artists that deserve
Mm-hmm.
their words deserve to be heard, and so I said I made all these copies of everything, and I came across 4 7-inch reels that I had done with Steve Miller. When I say 7-inch reel, I'll show the camera, even though this is a podcast, but you're looking at it. This is these are reel-to-reels.
Right.
And I came across 4 of them with Steve Miller. And so I had known Steve since the early 60s, mid-60s. I'd recorded him at a little club before he had signed a record contract. And so these recordings, not great quality, a few sung things that came out okay that we played on the radio. But I got in touch with him through Joel Sullivan, who's a writer, gave me his contact information, and I said I wanted to send these CDs of those to him. So we got to talking on the phone after he got them, and I mentioned that I'd been doing interviews with a lot of other people, and Steve Miller is a very big blues fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in fact, that's on I didn't mention, that's on my YouTube channel, a 2-part interview with Steve Miller, talking about his early blues days in Texas and in Wisconsin and in Chicago, and then coming out to San Francisco, but nothing really about his rock and roll days after that. And so he said, oh, I want to see copies of all of your interview. Oh, give me copies of all of these. I want to hear the John Lee Hooker. I want to hear the Bobby Blue Band. All these things. So okay, so I made copies of everything for him. About 30. I must have sent him 30 or 40 CDs. And then when I was in New York in I think October of 2022, we got it set up for me to come to his house up in the country, and to do an interview with him. And we spent the day with him pretty much from lunch and through dinner, and then towards the end before we had dinner, so I said, well, do you want to do I said, can we do this interview? He said, oh, you want to do the interview? Because we were just reminiscing, because we had known each other a long time ago, and so we were catching up on things. And he was saying, I'm going to help you to get all this stuff out. I'm on the board for Lincoln Center and in the Memphis Blues Society or whatever, and I'll help you to get some of these things out there. And I said, oh, great. And so we did the interview with him, and he gave a great interview. He's
He's a great interview.
Perfect person to interview.
Mm-hmm.
And so I produced that into a couple 1-hour shows, but nothing ever happened with any of my stuff. And so my son is a computer scientist, and we got to talking, and I talked to a jazz musician as well. People are saying, well, put your stuff up on YouTube. I said, YouTube? I go, yeah. So I started this, got the website. I'll say it again because I'm promoting it.
And you
Although I
should.
don't make any money on it, it's a non-monetized channel. I make zero money on it. I don't want to make any money on it. But I got the website, www.dannythehat.com. That's DANNYTHEHAT.com. And so I put my stuff up on there. The first one I put up was Lee Morgan. And I was getting like 400 or 500 hits a day. And I go, oh, man, there's a huge, thirst for this kind of stuff. And then I put up more and more of my shows on there. And then I was talking to Tom Mazzolini, and he had given me the go-ahead to put the Steve Miller interview up on, play it on his radio show. So I said, gee, I guess I can do radio again. But I was really scared of doing it electronically. I used a program called Hindenburg. It's an audio editing program. And I said, I'm too old to learn how to do this technical editing stuff. I don't know how to do this. I got to use a mouse and stuff, and I'm used to a razor blade. I'm not, but it's a great program. Hindenburg's a great audio program, and so suddenly I realized that I could move the music exactly where I wanted it to start and finish, and with a mouse, and I could take a record and edit out a crack, a little crackle, a snap in there, because you can expand the wave and see exactly where you want to cut a little thing out that might be a 32nd of a second or whatever, and so I got comfortable with it, and then and Tom has always been very gracious and generous with allowing me to play my shows on his interviews on his program. So then I reached out to Nick Gravenitis, went up to his house, who did 3 one-hour programs with Nick Gravenitis, who wrote Born in Chicago, and he helped Mike Bloomfield found the Electric Flag, and when Janis Joplin left Big Brother and the holding company, he became the singer with Big Brother, and he worked with Quicksilver Messenger Service, I believe, helped produce the record. Very, very interesting guy. And I did an interview with him between times when he was smoking something to kind of keep him away. He was in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and so he'd have to take a lot of breaks. But then he would wake up again and say, "Okay, let's go ahead again." And so he gave me a really, really interesting interview over those 3 one-hour shows. And I did the same one. I haven't put it up on my YouTube channel, but a similar thing with Rick Estrin. I spent probably 4 hours interviewing him up at his house in Sacramento recently. And those have played on the radio, and I just have to put them on my channel. But nowadays, when I put an interview up on my channel, I didn't do it with Van Morrison. I may go back in and redo it, but I try to make it more like a movie. So I go on the net and grab a lot of photos, and I'll put them up to illustrate. So like with the Bloomfield last interview, when he talks about Scotty Moore with Elvis, I show a little picture of Scotty Moore. When he talks about how he used to work in a pawn shop, I have a picture of a pawn shop, and so I like producing them into visuals, although most people just listen, on their phones or whatever. But so it takes about 20 to 30 hours to add photos to illustrate an interview to do it properly. But anyway, that's how I got back into it, was because I realized, hey, YouTube is a great source. Now, the drawback to YouTube, if you have to have one, I mean, I think it's fabulous, but there are copyright issues. And sometimes stuff gets blocked, and you don't know why.
Right.
Everything seems to get blocked in Belarus and in Russia, but I don't worry about that. And they say, well, do you want to cut that music out? No, I don't care if anybody in Belarus or Russia listens to it. But that's an issue. But so far, and there are some of my interviews that are on there, like the one with Little Milton. For whatever reason, his music is blocked. I can't put it on there. There's just maybe 1 or 2 pieces of music, and it's mostly the interview with him. Same thing happened with my interview with Bobby Hutcherson, the vibraphonist, jazz vibraphonist, and I had to cut out all the music, and then they blocked the program, and then so I put out a second version of it, but I didn't delete the first one, even though it wasn't showing up on YouTube, and lo and behold, it's been cleared, and it's there now with all the music. So,
the mysteries of YouTube. Are there other things from back in the 60s and 70s that you still are hoping to put up there?
I've pretty much exhausted them. I got to put up part 2 of the Van Morrison show, a pro interview. I've got one with a guy named Pete Drake, who was a pedal steel guitarist, and I interviewed him down in Nashville. So that's one of the few. But I have a ton of jazz interviews that I need to produce into shows. I don't really have a good radio station to play them on right now. It would just be on my YouTube channel. And of course, live radio is so exciting, and it motivates me to do that. But I have interviews I've done recently with Christian McBride, Rini Rosnes, Ravi Coltrane, and others that I'm going to put up on my YouTube channel. It takes time, and I'm doing a couple of radio shows a week for a local jazz station, but it's on their second channel. It's a sub channel, and I don't think anybody listens to it. But I'm building up a large inventory of 1 hour jazz programs featuring each show features just one jazz artist and music from the 50s and the 60s.
Is this available on the internet?
I had set up a separate YouTube channel, and I put up one on Jimmy Smith and one on Wes Montgomery and 4 other ones, and 2 of them have already been blocked. So I'm going, well, I don't know how much that's going to work, but I'm going to try to distribute them through it's called PRX, Public Radio Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my goal. But I enjoy doing it. I learn about these artists, and it'd be fun to do one on blues as well. But there's been an awful, take one artist and do a special on it. But I've got an interview coming up with D.K. Harrell. He's a great blues guitarist, and that one I'm sure will probably play on Tom Mazzolini's program, and the Tommy Castro one as well. So it's still fun to do it. It's just kind of nice to know at age 77 that I haven't totally lost my mind, that it works, a little bit.
My final question to you: now that you're doing it, how different an interviewer are you from that 19-year-old kid back in the 60s?
Well, that's a good question. I do a lot of research now, because it's so easy to do on the internet. Mm-hmm. And I read tons of interviews, that are printed interviews, and I listen to interviews. Like I was thinking of doing an interview with Kid Anderson, who runs Greaseland. You did a great interview with him. And so if I were to do an interview with him for my podcast, I'd be listening to yours and taking notes on questions you ask. So because I notice you're very well informed when you talk to these musicians and you point out something, and then they can riff on that. Say, oh yeah, well that happened, this such and such. So I try to be as prepared as I can. But I think even back in those days, what little I could do, you'd read record liner notes and you would talk to musicians and you would learn about people. But it's a lot better in that way. And for some reason, when I do an interview with somebody, usually I can still ask them questions and get them to open up about things. And it's just when I do my jazz show, I have to write out everything I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. Because but when I'm doing something live or like talking with you, it seems to I still seem to function somewhat.
Well, Dan, it's a pleasure meeting you. I'm glad you reached out to me. I found some of the interviews just amazing, and as I said, hearing Elvin Bishop in the 70s or late 60s, and it was when music was really happening, and it's nice to get that perspective. So thank you for that, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I'll put in one little quick mention on one of the Mike Bloomfield interviews that I did back in '71. He talks about going into a bar. If anybody wants to hear this story, he goes into a bar in Chicago. As I asked him, were things rough? And he says, oh yeah. He says, one time I was at a bar, and this guy slammed this lady's head down on the bar and said, give this bitch a beer. And I go, wow, was she unconscious, or what happened? He said, no, her severed head. So that's on one of my Mike Bloomfield interviews, and it's so funny.
on that lovely
it's not
note.
Funny. It was not a true story.
Right.
He later told me it was not a true story, but Mike was prone to making interviews interesting.
Thank you, Dan.
Keep up the great work, Mako.
You too.
Great job. Thank you.